Om Hari Om. Om Hari Om. Om Sahana Bhavatu. Sahano Bhunaktu. Sahaviryam Karavavahai. Tejasvina Vaditamastu. Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti. 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 Om. May the Divine Being look over us lovingly as a mother and father. May the Divine Being support and nourish us as a mother and father. May we have the strength and skill to study together the art of spirituality. May no misunderstandings arise amongst us. Om, peace, peace. Peace be unto thee and unto us and to all your beloved beings everywhere. Vicky, just to finish that thought of why we got cut off, I have no idea. But send your email again, please, to KemperGW. That's KEMPER, KEMPERGW, like George Washington, at gmail.com.
Okay.
We'll see if it doesn't get through this time.
Okay. Thank you.
And thank you for your kind attention. Dear hearts, this is our Tuesday evening class on the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. Thank you for attending. Thank you for being with us. Let's hope some others join us. And of course, as always, our beloved reader is Haima Naidu, who is speaking to us from Denver. She will tell us where we are in the book, and we will begin.
Good evening and namaste, everybody. Thank you, Brother Shankara. And we are on PDF page 71. That's the last days at Kausipur. That's where I will be starting. When Sri Ramakrishna's illness showed signs of aggravation, the devotees, following the advice of Dr. Sarkar, rented a spacious garden house at Kausipur in the northern suburbs of Calcutta. The master was removed to this place on December 11th, 1885. It was at Kausipur that the curtain fell on the varied activities of the master's life on the physical plane. His soul lingered in the body 8 months more. It was the period of his great passion, a constant crucifixion of the body, and the triumphant revelation of the soul. Here one sees the humanity and divinity of the master passing and repassing across a thin borderline. Every minute of those 8 months was suffused with the touching tenderness of heart and breathtaking elevation of spirit. Every word he uttered was full of pathos and sublimity. It took the group only a few days to become adjusted to the new environment. The Holy Mother, assisted by Sri Ramakrishna's niece, Lakshmi Devi, and a few women devotees, took charge of the cooking for the master and his attendants. Surendra willingly bore the major portion of the expenses, other householders contributing according to their means. 12 disciples were constant attendants of the master: Narendra, Rakha, Baburam, Niranjan, Jogin, Latu, Tarak, the elder Gopal, Kali, Shashi, Sharat, and the younger Gopal. Sarada, Harish, Hari, Gangadhar, and Tulasi visited the master from time to time and practiced the sadhana at home. Narendra, preparing for his law examination, brought his books to the garden house in order to continue his studies during the infrequent spare moments. He encouraged his brother disciples to intensify their meditation, scriptural studies, and other spiritual disciplines. They all forgot their relatives and their worldly duties. Among the attendants, Sashi was the embodiment of service. He did not practice meditation, japa, or any of the other disciplines followed by his brother devotees. He was convinced that service to the Guru was the only religion for him. He forgot food and rest and was ever ready at the master's bedside. Pandit Shashadhar one day suggested to the master that the latter could remove the illness by concentrating his mind on the throat, the scriptures having declared that yogis had power to cure themselves in that way. The master rebuked the Pandit. The master rebuked the Pandit. For a scholar like you to make such a proposal, he said, how can I withdraw the mind from the lotus feet of God and turn it to this worthless cage of flesh and blood? For our sake at least, begged Narendra and the other disciples. But, replied Sri Ramakrishna, do you think I enjoy this suffering? I wish to recover, but that depends on the mother. A few hours later, the master said to Narendra, I said to her, Mother, I cannot swallow food because of my pain. Make it possible for me to eat a little. She pointed you all out to me and said, what? You're eating enough through all these mouths. Isn't that so? I was ashamed and could not utter another word. This dashed all the hopes of the devotees for the master's recovery. I shall make the whole thing public before I go, the master had said some time before. On January 1st, 1886, he felt better and came down to the garden for a little stroll. It was about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Some 30 lay disciples were in the hall or sitting about under the trees. Sri Ramakrishna said to Girish, well, Girish, what have you seen in me that you proclaim me before everybody as an incarnation of God? Girish was not the man to be taken by surprise. He knelt before the master and said with folded hands, what can an insignificant person like myself say about the one whose glory even sages like Vyasa and Valmiki could not adequately measure? The master was profoundly moved. He said, what more shall I say? I bless you all. Be illumined. He fell into a spiritual mood. Hearing these words, the devotees, one and all, became overwhelmed with emotion. They rushed to him and fell at his feet. He touched them all, and each received an appropriate benediction. Each of them, at the touch of the master, experienced ineffable bliss. Some laughed, some wept, some sat down to meditate, some began to pray. Some saw light, some had visions of their chosen ideals, and some felt within their bodies the rush of spiritual power. Narendra, consumed with a terrific fever for realization, complained to the master that all the others had attained peace and that he alone was dissatisfied. The master asked what he wanted. Narendra begged for samadhi so that he might altogether forget the world for 3 or 4 days at a time. You are a fool, the master rebuked him. There is a state even higher than that. Isn't it you who sing, all that exists art thou? First of all, settle your family affairs and then come to me. You will experience a state even higher than samadhi. The master did not hide the fact that he wished to make Narendra his spiritual heir. Narendra was to continue the work after Sri Ramakrishna's passing. Sri Ramakrishna said to him, I leave these young men in your charge. See that they develop their spirituality and do not return home. One day he asked the boys, in preparation for a monastic life, to beg their food from door to door without thought of caste. They hailed the master's order and went out with the begging bowls. A few days later, he gave the ochre cloth of the sannyasi to each of them, including Girish, who was now second to none in his spirit of renunciation. Thus, the master himself laid the foundation of the future Ramakrishna order of monks. Sri Ramakrishna was sinking day by day. His diet was reduced to a minimum, and he found it almost impossible to swallow. He whispered to M, I am bearing all this cheerfully, for otherwise you would be weeping. If you all say that it's better that the body should go rather than suffer this torture, I am willing. The next morning he said to his depressed disciples seated near the bed, do you know what I see? I see that God alone has become everything. Men and animals are only frameworks covered with skin, and it is He who is moving through their heads and limbs. I see that it is God Himself who has become the block, the executioner, and the victim for the sacrifice. He fainted with emotion. Regaining partial consciousness, he said, now I have no pain. I am very well. Looking at Latu, he said, there sits Latu, resting his head on the palm of his hand. To me, it is the Lord who is seated in that posture. The words were tender and touching. Like a mother, he caressed Narendra and Rakho, gently stroking their faces. He said in a half whisper to M, had this body been allowed to last a little longer, many more souls would have been illumined. He paused a moment and then said, but Mother has ordained otherwise. She will take me away lest, finding me guileless and foolish, people should take advantage of me and persuade me to bestow on them the rare gifts of spirituality. A few minutes later, he touched his chest and said, here are two beings. One is she and the other is her devotee. It is the latter who broke his arm, and it is he again who is now ill. Do you understand me? After a pause, he added, alas, to whom shall I tell all this? Who will understand me? Pain, he consoled them again, is unavoidable as long as there is a body. The Lord takes on the body for the sake of his devotees. Yet one is not sure whether the master's soul actually was tortured by this agonizing disease. At least during his moments of spiritual exaltation, which became almost constant during the closing days of his life on earth, he lost all consciousness of the body, of illness and suffering. One of his attendants said later on, while Sri Ramakrishna lay sick, he never actually suffered pain. He would often say, "Oh mind, forget the body, the sickness, and remain merged in bliss." No, he did not really suffer. He would be in a state when the thrill of joy was clearly manifest in his body. Even when he could not speak, he would let us know in some that there was no suffering, and this fact was clearly evident to all who watched him. People who did not understand him thought that his suffering was very great. What spiritual joy he transmitted to us at that time. Could such a thing have been possible if he had been suffering physically? It was during this period that he taught us again these truths. Brahman is always unattached. The three gunas are in it, but it is unaffected by them. Just as the wind carries odor, it remains odorless. Brahman is infinite being, infinite wisdom, infinite bliss. In it, there exists no delusion, no misery, no disease, no death, no growth, no decay. The transcendental being and the being within are one and the same. There is one indivisible absolute existence. The Holy Mother secretly went to a Shiva temple across the Ganges to intercede with the deity for the master's recovery. In a revelation, she has told to prepare herself for the inevitable end. One day, when Narendra was on the ground floor meditating, the master was lying awake in his bed upstairs. In the depths of his meditation, Narendra felt as though a lamp were burning at the back of his head. Suddenly, he lost consciousness. It was the end for all-effacing experience of Nirvikalpa Samadhi, when the embodied soul realizes its unity with the Absolute. After a very long time, he regained partial consciousness, but was unable to find his body. He could see only his head. "Where's my body?" he cried. The elder Gopal entered the room and said, "Why, it's here, Naren." But Narendra could not find it. Gopal, frightened, ran upstairs to the master. Sri Ramakrishna only said, "Let him stay that way for a time. He has worried me long enough." After another long period, Narendra regained full consciousness. Bathed in peace, he went to the master, who said, "Now the mother has shown you everything. But this revelation will remain under lock and key, and I shall keep the key. When you have accomplished the mother's work, you will find the treasure again." Some days later, Narendra being alone with the master, Sri Ramakrishna looked at him and went into samadhi. Narendra felt the penetration of a subtle force and lost all outer consciousness. Regaining presently the normal mood, he found the master weeping. Sri Ramakrishna said to him, "Today I have given you my all, and I am now only a poor fakir, possessing nothing. By this power, you will do immense good in the world, and not until it's accomplished will you return." Henceforth, the master lived in the disciple. Doubt, however, dies hard. After 1 or 2 days, Narendra said to himself, If in the midst of this racking physical pain, he declares his Godhead, then only shall I accept him as an incarnation of God. He was alone by the bedside of the Master. It was a passing thought, but the Master smiled. Gathering his remaining strength, he distinctly said, "He who was Rama and Krishna is now in this body, Ramakrishna, but not in your Vedantic sense." Narendra was stricken with shame. That's the end of this subchapter. Hasipur, Brother Shankara.
Very good.
Comments? Any?
I think we've read it more than once. And of course, it's worth hearing more than once because there's so much here. But I'm glad we're going to go on now. Is there anything that anyone would like to add from their own experience or from any concern or question that they may have about anything that was read? So much was said about the Master, his relationship with Narendra and the other devotees, especially those who would go on to become the monks of the Ramakrishna order. Is there anything at all that is a matter of interest or concern to you that you would like to bring up?
Brother, what did he mean when he said, but not in your Vedantic sense?
The Vedantic sense is in the transcendental sense. He meant he was that in the worldly sense. He had lived in the world as Vishnu. Who was it that became Rama? Who was it that became Krishna? When Sri Ramakrishna was to be born, he appeared to his father Kudiram. His father had a vision in Gaya, and it was Vishnu, this being, pea green in complexion, who said, "I will be born as your son." And so it was indeed this lifelong play in the phenomenal world that he was Rama and Krishna, or Ramakrishna, not in the Vedantic sense of a transcendental being. Does that make sense?
Yeah. He's basically, he's just meaning, well, I know what you're saying. He's talking about an avatar with attributes, not
Exactly.
or not ultimate Brahman.
Exactly. An avatar, an incarnation of God with the attributes that Sri Ramakrishna manifested. That's exactly it. Which, of course, wasn't just then, it continues now. We are the beneficiaries, yea, unto this evening, reading about this, since the gospel was composed specifically for our consumption and for our education. Sri Ramakrishna continues to be an active part of all of our lives who follow his tradition. Now, is there any reason you must follow his tradition? No, of course not. But if you do, then you are the beneficiary of all that he brought with him, which of course was all that is in the way of spiritual wisdom, knowledge, and accomplishment. These became his spiritual treasure box, which he can open and share with us, and we have only to ask. Anything else from anyone?
Yes, brother, I have a question.
Yes, dear.
A ways back in that passage where the incident is described where Ramakrishna feels somewhat better, and so he's outside with the disciples underneath the trees, and he blesses them, and they experience bliss. Isn't that referred to as Sri Ramakrishna being the wish-fulfilling tree?
Yes, the term is used, kalpataru, that is the wish-fulfilling tree. The Ramakrishna order Swamis object to this. They say it's far greater than the wish-fulfilling tree. But nevertheless, on January 1st, we celebrate this, and the Ramakrishna order centers do too, not just us. But they celebrate this event in time. It wasn't really an event in time. He was producing that result in his devotees at all throughout all that time. But this was the time when they caught the scent, as it were, fully of the flower that he was. And so it had whatever effect it had on them. But yes, it is the wish-fulfilling tree, the Kalpataru Day. January 1st at 3 p.m. That's when we typically celebrate.
And is it referred? Is it called? Is it referred to by that name when it's related in the gospel? Or
no, that name came out later. But if you Google Kalpataru Day, you'll see that that's what's meant.
Okay, thank you.
I don't think it's ever referred to in the gospel as the Kalpataru Day. No, I think that came later.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Brother Shankara,
Yes, dear.
Vicky again. I actually got to spend that day at the Chennai or Madras Center.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it was great.
I'm sure they celebrated it with great feeling and with great ceremonial significance. And
Yes.
all of you who were there were invited to share in what the Master gave on that day. Tell us a little bit more about it, Vicki. What happened?
Honestly, it's kind of a foggy memory. I remember the prasad.
Well, we often remember the.
But yeah, it was just, I don't know, it was really peaceful, and of course there were a lot of people, and very beautiful arrangements.
Of course.
Yeah, it was just a very beautiful
This
day.
is how the Swamis always do things with, as you say, all with beautiful puja arrangements. And then at the end, there's always the lovely prasad to share. That food and drink that has been offered to the Master and to the Mother is then shared with all the devotees. Thanks for bringing up your personal experience. As I also had many experiences before I came to Georgia, I had many experiences of Kalpataru Day with the devotees of the Vedanta Society of Southern California. Anything else before we read on? All right, dear, please pick it up. And
Brother Shankara, I goofed. I have to confess my apologies. I was supposed to start on page 77. By accident, I went back to 71 because it's a PDF. My paper notes were on the side of me. I didn't realize. I went back and read it. When I was reading, I know I read this. It was hitting me, but I didn't realize I was making a mistake. So do you want me to continue?
as I said, dear, I knew that it had been read before, but
Yeah,
I figured it's worth hearing again.
that's good. I'm
There's so much rich.
sorry about that, everybody. I
No,
realize.
not to be sorry. As I was saying, there, if it hadn't been Mother's will, it would not have happened.
I guess so.
We don't take personal responsibilities for this kind of mistake.
Thank you. If it's a book, I always keep my papers, everything in the book on the page I was supposed to read. And this
Well,
PDF, so I date it. And
begin now at page 77 then.
Mm.
yes, yeah. And I have 3 more pages to go for 77. So then I will catch. You want me to go ahead and do it? Mahasamadhi?
Hi, Ma. I just wanted to add, no matter how many times we read, there's something new we learned. So
Yes, that's
it's just, it is just prasad.
If it's more of what's been read before, dear, then skip it.
that's right.
If it's new material, then read it. But if it's more of what we've heard before,
Yes.
because if I'm not mistaken, it's 3 times we've heard it.
Yeah, I think we were fixed to start on master and disciples.
Yes, that's where I was, page 77. That's
That's
where
why it took me so long. I couldn't figure out where in the world you were.
All right.
I goofed. I goofed. I think even master and disciple was done. So I'll just go ahead quickly, Mahasamadhi and master and disciple, and then go on from there, Brother Shankara. Is that okay?
As I said, if it's something that has been read before,
Okay.
then skip it.
Okay, I will. I'll skip it then. Let me just see my date here. Page 77. Okay, I'll start with the master and disciple. I think he's right. I didn't mark it right. Okay, master and disciple. M's first visit to the master. It was on a Sunday in spring, a few days after Sri Ramakrishna's birthday, that M met him the first time. Sri Ramakrishna lived at the Kalibari, the temple garden of Mother Kali, on the bank of the Ganges at Dakshineshwar. M, being at leisure on Sundays, had gone with his friend Sidhu to visit several gardens at Baranagore.
We've read this before also.
That's what I'm thinking, 77.
We've read this before also.
Yes.
Go forward to what we have not read.
To 77. That's where I feel like I read that one too. Yes.
No, there's no question.
Mm-hmm.
Read that. That was read aloud.
Married.
Go ahead to where we start with what has not yet ever been read.
That's where I'm going.
Aloud in this group.
Yes. Okay. 77.
I mean, it isn't that M's meeting with the master wasn't important, but
Yeah.
in terms of the overall scope of things, it's more or less incidental.
I would start from M's second visit. That's what my notes are saying.
All right. Let's start with M's second visit.
M's second visit to Sri Ramakrishna took place on the southeast veranda at 8 o'clock in the morning. The master was about to be shaved, the barber having just arrived. As the cold season still lingered, he had put on a moleskin shawl bordered with red. Seeing M, the master said, "So you have come. That's good. Sit down here." He was smiling. He stammered a little when he spoke. Sri Ramakrishna to M, "Where do you live?" M, "In Calcutta, sir." Sri Ramakrishna, "Where are you staying here?" M, "I am at Baranagore at my older sister's Ishan Kaviraj's house." Sri Ramakrishna, "Oh, at Ishan's. Well, how is Keshav now?" "He was very ill." M, "Indeed, I have heard so too, but I believe he is well now." Master's love for Keshav. Sri Ramakrishna, "I made a vow to worship the mother with green coconut and sugar on Keshav's recovery. Sometimes in the early hours of the morning, I would wake up and cry before her, 'Mother, please make Keshav well again.' If Keshav doesn't live, whom shall I talk with when I go to Calcutta?" And so it was that I resolved to offer her the green coconut and sugar. Tell me, do you know of a certain Mr. Cook who has come to Calcutta? Is it true that he is giving lectures? Once Keshav took me on a steamer, and this Mr. Cook too was in the party. M. Yes, sir, I have heard something like that, but I've never been to his lectures. I don't know much about him. Sri Ramakrishna and M's marriage. Sri Ramakrishna. Pratap's brother came here. He stayed a few days. He had nothing to do and said he wanted to live here. I came to know that he had left his wife and children with his father-in-law. He has a whole brood of them, so I took him to task. Just fancy, he is the father of so many children. Will people from the neighborhood feed them and bring them up? He isn't even ashamed that someone else is feeding his wife and children, and that they have been left at his father-in-law's house. I scolded him very hard and asked him to look for a job. Then he was willing to leave here. Are you married? M. Yes, sir. Sri Ramakrishna with a shudder. Oh, Ramlal, alas, he's married. Like one guilty of a terrible offense, M. sat motionless, his eyes fixed on the ground. He thought, is it such a wicked thing to get married? The master continued, have you any children? M. This time could hear the beating of his own heart. He whispered in a trembling voice, yes, sir, I have children. Very sadly, Sri Ramakrishna said, ah, me, he even has children. Thus rebuked M sat speechless. His pride had received a blow. After a few minutes, Sri Ramakrishna looked at him kindly and said affectionately, you see, you have certain good signs. I know them by looking at a person's forehead, his eyes, and so on. Tell me now, what kind of person is your wife? Has she spiritual attributes, or is she under the power of avidya? She's all right, but I'm afraid she's ignorant. Master, with evident displeasure, and you are a man of knowledge. I had yet to learn the distinction between knowledge and ignorance. Up to this time, his conception had been that one got knowledge from books and schools. Later on, he gave up this false conception. He was taught that to know God is knowledge, and not to know him, ignorance. When Sri Ramakrishna exclaimed, are you a man of knowledge? When Sri Ramakrishna exclaimed, and you are a man of knowledge, M's ego was again badly shocked. That's the end of Sri Ramakrishna and M's marriage, Brother Shankara.
Mhm.
The next subheading is God with and without form.
Okay, before we go ahead,
Sure.
is there anything that anyone would like to say or ask about this relationship as it bloomed between Sri Ramakrishna and M? We'll probably come to this soon, but I'll just note that Sri Ramakrishna was once asked, well, who is this M? And he said, oh, he is but my instrument. And by that he meant he was the one making the notes and taking down what Sri Ramakrishna said so that he could later produce the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, which of course he did many years later. And so this is what he meant by he is my instrument. When Sri Ramakrishna said that, it was not taken as a blow to his ego by him. He felt very gratified to be the master's instrument. Anything else from anyone? All right, dear, please read on.
So M wasn't particularly a spiritual person before this, before meeting the master?
In a ritualistic a Hindu sense, he did his what's called sandhya, his ritualistic worship, but he wasn't. That was not the emphasis of his life. No, he met his guru when he met Sri Ramakrishna, and Sri Ramakrishna led him forward to a life that became a life of sainthood. But no, he was not he chanced upon Sri Ramakrishna, we can say, because of that story we heard. He was out just looking at the beautiful temple gardens along the Ganges with his relative. And so that was the first encounter with Sri Ramakrishna. He was just an ordinary, somewhat scholarly fellow, as it was said. He thought before that one learned about God from books. He was disabused of this notion by Sri Ramakrishna, who taught him that we learn of God through personal experience. And learning about through books gives us certain signs and indications of what to do, and may lead us to a teacher, someone who has written one of those books, something of that kind. But no, he was not especially a spiritual man.
In order to become the instrument, I mean, I'm assuming that he surrendered his will to Sri Ramakrishna.
Slowly, yes. Bit by bit, we see this. It didn't happen all at once. It can't happen for us all at once. Because if we surrender all at once, then our worldly lives are completely devastated. And this is what Sri Ramakrishna was talking about, that fellow Pratap that wanted to give up his worldly life and left his wife and children in the care of others. And as Sri Ramakrishna, it was said of Sri Ramakrishna that he rebuked him. Now, when it says Sri Ramakrishna rebuked someone, this was not something to be taken lightly. And we noticed that the fellow did go back and get a job. So Sri Ramakrishna was constantly teaching everyone everyone he encountered, including M. And as I say, over the 4 or 5 years that the master and M were together, he gave him what became the tools to become very saintly, as he did Girish Ghosh and many others. Thanks, Bhagavan Das, as always, for those good questions. Anything else from anyone? Okay, how are we doing for time?
Oh, we have plenty of time, Brother Shankara. It's about 17 minutes we have.
Very
So,
good. Read on, dear.
Okay. Next subheading is God with and without form. Master, well, do you believe in God with form or without form? M, rather surprised, said to himself, how can one believe in God without form when one believes in God with form? And if one believes in God without form, how can one believe that God has a form? Can these two contradictory ideas be true at the same time? Can a white liquid like milk be black? M again, Sir, I like to think of God as formless. Master, very good. It's enough to have faith in either aspect. You believe in God without form, that's quite all right. But never for a moment think that this alone is true and all else false. Remember that God with form is just as true as God without form. But hold fast to your own conviction. The assertion that both are equally true amazed M. He had never learned this from his books. Thus, his ego received a third blow. But since it was not yet completely crushed, he came forward to argue with the master a little more. And the next subheading is God and the clay image.
Mhm.
M. Sir, suppose one believes in God with form. Certainly, he is not the clay image. Master interrupting, but why clay? It's an image of spirit. M could not quite understand the significance of this image of spirit. But sir, he said to the master, one should explain to those who worship the clay image that it's not God, and that while worshiping it, they should have God in view and not the clay image. One should not worship clay. Next little subheading is God, the only real teacher. Master sharply, that's the one hobby of you Calcutta people.
Now let's just,
Sure.
here is another word for rebuke. Master, sharply. You can imagine that this was said with real strength and emphasis, not anger, but absolute conviction from his own knowledge. So please start that sentence over, dear.
Okay. The previous sentence, Brother Shankara. M could not quite understand the significance. That's where.
No, that's fine. Go ahead.
Okay. M could not quite understand the significance of this image of spirit. But sir, he said to the master, one should explain to those who worship the clay image that it's not God, and that while worshiping it, they should have God in view and not the clay image. One should not worship clay. Next, master, this is God, the only real teacher. Master sharply, that's the one hobby of you Calcutta people, giving lectures and bringing others to the light. Nobody ever stops to consider how to get the light himself. Who are you to teach others? He who is the Lord of the universe will teach everyone. He alone teaches us who has created this universe, who has made the sun and moon, men and beasts, and all other beings, who has provided means for their sustenance, who has given children parents and endured them with love to bring them up. The Lord has done so many things. Will he not show people the way to worship him? If they need teaching, then he will be the teacher. He is our inner guide. Suppose there is an error in worshiping the clay image. Doesn't God know that through it, he alone is being invoked? He will be pleased with that very worship. Why should you get a headache over it? You had better try for knowledge and devotion yourself. This time, Yam felt that his ego was completely crushed. He now said to himself, yes, he has spoken the truth. What need is there for me to teach others? Have I known God? Do I really love him? I haven't room enough for myself in my bed, and I'm inviting my friend to share it with me. I know nothing about God, yet I'm trying to teach others. What a shame. How foolish I am.
Hold on just a moment.
Sure.
Notice this is the moment in which M accepts Sri Ramakrishna as his guru.
Mm.
He feels that his former self, his small self, his ego self, has been completely shattered by Sri Ramakrishna's teachings. And he says, who am I who have not enough room in my bed to invite somebody else to share it with me? What an humble and homely image. So he now he begins his relationship with Sri Ramakrishna, which lasts, as I said, somewhere between 4 and 5 years, where he is absolutely wedded to the idea that Sri Ramakrishna is his teacher. And he eventually brings his wife at Sri Ramakrishna's invitation, and she becomes his disciple as well, a rare instance. We'll learn about that. But these are the moments that we see where in the lives of so many, we see suddenly this switch is flipped, if you will, from I am my own teacher, or books are my teacher, scriptures are my teacher, to know I have this teacher. And as I said, this is available to each of us as we wish it. And this is one of the reasons to involve ourselves with the Ramakrishna Order Swamis, because they are the voice and face of this eternal teacher that came to us as Sri Ramakrishna. He's no longer with us in physical form, except in as much as he transforms these swamis into the voice and face and being of the eternal teacher. Anything else from anyone?
It's like they become avatars of the avatar.
Exactly. They take on the attributes of the avatar, not of their own will, because their own will has been surrendered. This is where the surrender takes place. When we yield to the idea that as Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother said, God alone is the doer. God alone is the doer. I was talking about earlier that Brahman is the only reality. The gunas are within the operative principles. The gunas are within Brahman, but Brahman is not within the gunas. And so this is how we come to see what happens to us and in our lives.
So backing up to where the very beginning of what we just read, when it was talking about the form and the formless. So, when they talk about Kali being black, but up close is clear. In my own personal experience, that it took me a really long time to realize, because to me, when I'm meditating or in a higher plane, I really can't. Sri Ramakrishna and Kali are the same. I can't, distinguish. But at the same time, the feeling of the presence is so strong that I realized that, because I told you before, I don't know why, but I could never see the face of the master, even before I came to Vedanta. And then I realized that I think it's because the mind is trying to impute a form on something that's formless. And to me, I think that's why they talk about Kali as clear or black and unperceptible to the rational mind.
Well, as we read earlier, Sri Ramakrishna pointed to his own body and said, there are two here. She is here and her worshiper is here. So you're right in feeling there is no difference between Sri Ramakrishna and Kali. She totally took over his being. We can and will read about that as we go on, how that actually happened. But then her worshiper, who is this? This is Vishnu. He who is Rama, he who is Krishna, is here as Ramakrishna. And so there is both the formless, Kali is without form, and that which has form, the master's body as this incarnation of Vishnu. Now, it is indeed incomprehensible to the finite mind how all this can simultaneously be true. Well and good. Don't trouble yourself about trying to understand it.
Well, it's not, I think I understand it now. It's just, used to, I would have sworn to you that I could see the form, but then I realized I couldn't. It's the mind trying to impute it, but there's no way I can bring it to mind.
Well, it is the mind that tries to impute everything. There is no other organ of our being that takes what is offered to it and makes a reality of it. I mean, there is the Atman behind. The Atman is not doing or making anything. It is simply witnessing what is made. So it is the mind that constructs all our reality. Takes every little scrap of our samskaras, our mental impressions, and turns them into what we experience as our lives. Yea, unto this moment. We're experiencing this now because our minds wish us to. If we didn't wish to be here and our minds weren't involved and engaged in it, it would be meaningless. It would just be gibberish to us.
You know what I think really makes that become a lot clearer is when, you realize that the continuity chronologically, what we would think is in chronological time from life to life isn't there. And then you realize, well, it is just an illusion.
Yes, and it isn't even chronologically within time right now. Vivekananda says, as you dream when you're asleep and it's incoherent and disconnected, so this waking life is also a dream, just as incoherent and disconnected. We are making the connections. And it is a wondrous thing that we do it. It is just astounding.
Once you realize the lack of continuity, it really starts to break down the Maya of the ephemeral life.
Yes, and this is why we have to be careful and just go ahead with our spiritual practices as given to us. Because if we go too fast, our nervous system and our finite mind will not be able to handle the amount of energy that's generated. This energy is called tapasya. That means heat or friction. And so we have to be gentle with ourselves and be patient with the pace at which we become saints, which may take a long time. And it may not occur until we actually pass from this body. Anything else from anyone?
Yes, brother. So it's a good bit of a balancing act to have a yearning for God and at the same time to be patient and not try to force it, because you can't force it anyway.
Exactly.
That's what we read about the Purusha Kara the last time, about self-will can't produce grace.
Nope. We accept the invitation to grace. But you're absolutely right, Jeff. There's no way to force it. Our impatience is just another way to distract ourselves. And it's so inviting. Oh, I'm being impatient. I'm being a good person. I'm being impatient that this happened faster. God alone is the doer. The pace is determined by the doer, not by that which is being done to or has become the instrument of the doer.
For me, it's like, things that you thought that you've surrendered, and then they crop back up, and
Oh, yeah.
it's just like,
Yes, indeed. And will for years and years, in subtler and subtler forms. And that's all fine. The Swamis will tell you. That's all just fine. That's just to be expected. You're deepening and deepening and deepening your experience of your waking consciousness, then your latent subconscious, then, well, wait a minute, first your waking subconscious, first your waking awareness, then your waking subconscious, and then your latent subconscious. Slowly and slowly you become aware of the causes and effects that are taking place within your ephemeral being. Well and good.
so do you personally, or, do you have any physical sensations of it moving around?
Dear heart, it's not, if you want to talk to me about these things, we need to talk personally. It's not, as a monk, I have been literally forbidden to talk about those things in a public forum. So if you want to, just call me up on the phone and we'll talk about it.
Brother Shankara, our time is up. I can stop and then start next week. God, the only real teacher. This is only very short. Yes.
Very good.
Yes, it's already 8:32 your time.
Okay, very good, dear.
Mm-hmm.
Well, as always, how delightful that we gathered together, that there are 8 of us who are sharing this. Many more are sharing it and don't know it. But this is how we proceed with these gatherings, our Zoom gatherings. So I'll close as we normally do. Jai Shri Guru Maharaj Ji Ki Jai. Durga, Durga, Durga. May we be safe. May we be healthy. May we be cheerful. May we have peace of mind. And may we go forward in the secure knowledge that we are in the loving and protective embrace of the Divine Being as our mother and father. May we all be well and in bright spirits. Any final thought from anyone before I sign off? All right, dears. Until next time, which could be as early as tomorrow evening, a great good night to you.